We are back with another episode of the Career Dive podcast. I'm your host, Anna Believa, a world recognized career coach and a LinkedIn learning instructor. We are continuing diving into job interviews. We started with that last week. And in this episode, we're diving deep into what to do if you are landing interviews consistently, but they're not leading to offers. And if you are someone who goes to interviews, you feel like you are prepared, it went somewhat well, but then silence, no offer, maybe not even a callback to tell you you're not getting an offer. And if that happened to you, it's often most often than not, is not because you were not good enough, not because you don't have the right skills and experience. Sometimes it is, but most of the time, it's not because of the skills and experience and because you're not good enough or because someone else was just better. It's likely because of something subtle. It's often the interview mistakes that you're making. And today we're going to diagnose some of the biggest mistakes that keep amazing candidates like you. Because if you're listening to this podcast, I know you are an amazing candidate. What's keeping you from landing offers when you go for interviews? And the specific shifts that will change the way you approach interviews from now moving forward. And before we dive into the 3 mistakes today, I'm here to remind you that Master the Interview 2.0, that is the only course that you need to master the interview skill and start landing offers with ease. I have fully updated the course, and that means that the price is going up next week. So these are the last few days to join us with the old price. And we also have added an option for you to book a mock interview with a coach on my team. So if you are already going for interviews and they're not leading to offers, and or if you are in the process of job searching, but you're not yet at the interview stage level, this is the course that you have to start working on today. Because, and I can't stress this enough, you need to start prepping for interviews before you have an interview. I share this with my clients in the Start Canada, the coaching program that I have where I teach A to Z, everything job search, from confidence to clarity to how to land interviews to, of course, how to nail job interviews and land offers. We often talk about starting your interview prep really, really early in the process because it is like building a muscle. And the way you actually should be approaching job interviews is not something you have ever done. So it does take in the beginning a bit of time for you to organize your prep, to think of the stories that you need to have, to actually structure those stories and then practice them so that in an interview, you're actually very relaxed. You have that muscle memory because you've practiced enough times. You're relaxed, you're present, you're having a conversation, and it's really easy to tap back into those stories because, again, muscle memory. So, my friend, you have to start before you have interviews. Prepping the night before is possible, but it's just not going to feel as easy as if you have at least a couple of weeks or at least a week to practice. And again, I always tell my clients that it needs to be so top of mind, all of those interview stories when you are job searching, that if I wake you up in the middle of the night and I ask you, tell me about a time you had a conflict, you're ready to go. So that's how top of mind it needs to be when you're actively job searching. And good news is that interviewing is a skill. It's probably something that you never really invested enough time to. And that's why it feels big. It feels overwhelming. It feels like you're scrambling every single time. But because it's a skill, it means that you can master it. And the best part here is that once you master it, once you invest this time right now, from now on, when you have a job interview 2 years from now, you just go back to your notes, brush up, and then you're ready to go within one evening. But it does require that original initial time investment for you to really dive into the skill. So once again, the price for Master the Interview course is going up next week. So this is your final chance to join us at this old pricing. All right, my friends, let's dive into the episode. Mistake number 1 is over preparing for answers and under preparing for delivery. So here's what it looks like. What most people do when they're prepping for interviews, they kind of look up the list of common questions and they prepare some stories for that. Maybe now in the era of AI, you ask ChatGPT to tell you what would be the questions to expect for this type of role. It gives you a list of 5 maybe that you prepare for. You think through that and then you feel ready. But then if in an interview something unexpected comes up, and by unexpected, it's actually typically not that unexpected, but it's unexpected to you because you didn't plan. It wasn't one of those 5 or 6 questions or even 10 questions that you prepared for. So that's where you get nervous, you scramble, you ramble, and you lose control of your answer. And why this is so important is I think a lot of candidates kind of get in their head with like, well, it's just like a one-time thing. How do they expect me to be on point and prepared and structured and deliver the message so well? Is because you're going for these next level 6-figure roles. That's how you need to be coming across, and that's how prepared you need to be in your workplace meetings when you are talking to executives. That's the expectation, that you're prepared, that you're structured, and you don't ramble. And what, again, most people do is they're not really thinking strategically. They're just kind of focused on these specific questions that are potentially going to be asked and answers to those questions, but they're not thinking big picture. So they're not thinking, wait a second, what is important for the employer for this interview? What are they looking for from someone in this role? Because the questions they're going to be asked are based on what's important for the employer. They're never really random questions. So what I need for you to think about is that it's not just what you say, it's also how you say it. Meaning that, again, when you're going for that high level 6-figure role, you need to be very structured, concise, and strategic with your communication. That's just the default expectation from you. And again, it's not just answering those few questions, but rather as showing up as that next level candidate who understands what the employer is looking for and the value that they bring as it corresponds to what the employer is looking for. So again, there's a lot of strategy that goes into it, and that's something you really need to think through ahead of the interview. And this is actually something that my clients tell me all the time. I've actually heard it from my clients after they land jobs and after we reconnect 6 months later, a year later. Multiple people told me that, oh, those rule of 3, those frameworks, communication frameworks that you taught me for interviews is exactly how I now speak at work. And I can see the difference. And everyone around me is like, whoa, this was really good. I'm going to use that too. So you can't think of an interview as just a separate thing where you're performing in a certain way. It's how you just in general show up as a professional. That's where that expectation from the employer comes from, for you to be, again, structured and concise. Well, star candidates have a plan going into an interview. So the employer has a plan. So they know, okay, we want to ask these questions so that we hear about your skills and experience in X, Y, Z based on what they're looking for. So you also need to create a plan based on that. So you need to go into the interview with a plan of specific stories that you want to cover, specific experiences that you want to highlight, and bring it back up to the employer every single time with, hey, I know this is what you're looking for this type of role, and that's what I bring. That's why I'm going to be so successful in this role. So with every single thing that you say in the interview, every example, it's not just the answer to the question, but it's what they are looking for. So with every answer, they go, wow, that's exactly what we're looking for. How did you know? How did you know? This is amazing. Start candidates also use communication frameworks so that your answer is clear, impactful, concise, and structured. So the way I like for you to think about it is, and that's what I tell my clients all the time, that I need to be clear where you are in your answer. So if I ask you a question and it takes 5 minutes for me to kind of hear the answer to it, to like the main thing that I'm actually looking to hear from you, imagine how frustrated I feel. I'm just sitting there, and that's what most people do because everyone is just so focused on, the situation and the task and the context, which is not important at all. And I'm just here waiting. Well, what was the result? What did you actually do? And by the time you get to the result, and by the way, that's like that STAR formula that most people use for interview answers, or it takes you 5 minutes to get to the result. And most of the time, you don't even get to the result because it's been 5 minutes. You already forgot about it. So you need to make it very clear where you are in your answer, what's coming next, what I can expect, and then summarize it. And finally, here is Sure, you practice your answers, you practice your stories ahead of time, but you don't just rely on those memorized answers. By the way, you don't necessarily need to memorize them. You rather need to have the framework in your head and then just kind of fill in the blanks with the story. But you don't just rely on those memorized stories and answers, but you know them so well that it's really easy for you to tweak a sentence or two or to highlight a specific action over the other so that the story is really relevant to what the employer is looking for. Because when they're asking you about a conflict, when they're asking you about when you managed up, when you're asking you about teamwork, it's not just for fun. It's important to them and it's important for this role for a reason. So your answer, even if in general it might be a good story, needs to be answering what they're looking to hear. All right, mistake number 2. And this might sound silly, but I see this, I swear, every single day. And that is you're not answering the damn question. So what kind of happens here is I think most candidates are so stressed, so in their head, and they have, those few answers and stories memorized that they're just, oh, this can work here. So let me just use that. And they're not really fully hearing the question. I see this often happen with conflict questions or problem questions. And when you're telling the answer, I don't even hear what the conflict was or what the problem really was. I just kind of hear a story and I feel like, well, but I'm not really seeing you answer what I asked for. And that same thing happens with what I talked about earlier with you waiting 5 minutes to actually tell me what the result was, which is the number one thing I asked you about and that I care about. Or often people answer a completely different question. I actually see that also happen quite often, and they have no idea that they didn't answer the question at all. So here, I do believe it goes back to the level of preparation that you have and how relaxed you feel in an interview. Because if you're just so stressed about every single thing that you're going to say, it's really hard for you to relax and actually listen and to focus and pause and think for a second. Why did they ask this question? Okay, this is what they're looking for. So that's what I should focus on in this answer. So instead of focusing on what you need to say, you need to start thinking about what does the employer need to hear. So you need to start treating every question with what is the purpose? Why are they actually asking you this question? So the best candidates are really decoding what the employer is trying to assess here. So before you answer, you should ask yourself, why are they asking this? What skill or quality are they trying to evaluate? So let's say the employer is asking you, tell me about a time you faced a challenge. They're not looking for a random problem that you solved. The problem here actually doesn't even matter that much. It's more your thought process, your reaction to that problem, your actions, how you interacted with other people when a problem came up. Did you show up as a leader? So, and finally, think about the fact that that star candidate is someone who really connects the answer to the real reason behind the question. Because when you're talking about solving that problem to the employer, that's how you will approach a problem that will inevitably come up in the role that you will have. So you need to quite literally explicitly tell them that that's how I approach problems like ABC, and that's how I will be approaching them here. All right, let's move on to mistake number 3. And that is thinking that the best qualified person gets the job. And this is where a lot of candidates feel like, well, I just really need to show them that I have the skills and the qualifications and the experience. While the reality is the best storyteller wins. And again, before you get in your head, well, now I need to become a storyteller to land a job. Yes, because that's also what you need to be successful at those high 6-figure level jobs. So hiring is not just about who is the most qualified for this job. There are hundreds, if not thousands of people who are probably qualified for this job, unless it's something very, very unique and niche. But even then, there's still probably hundreds, at least dozens of people who can do the job. But it's rather about who makes the employer feel the most confident in their ability to deliver. So if you can't articulate the value that you bring in a way that's clear, concise, and engaging, that's why you can't land the job. Because once again, that's what you'll need to be doing, whether you're communicating with clients, whether you're communicating with internal teams, external vendors, that's the expectation from you there. That's why they want to see that in an interview. So instead of kind of listing things that you have done and really telling the employer things that are on your resume that they have seen already, you need to create a story. And in every story, if you think about it, there's some sort of a conflict or a problem or a challenge that was really hard. And then you solve through it. And then you come on top. And then specifically, the problem itself, what we talked about a little bit earlier, is not really that important. It's rather the process and the result. What is most important is your achievements and your impact. And then star candidates go even further. They always, and I won't shut up about this, they always bring it back to the employer. So what does this mean to you, Mr. or Mrs. Employer? The fact that I've solved this problem or this conflict or showed up as a leader. Well, this is how it translates into the value that I will bring into this company. This is what I'll deliver in this role. And that's why I'm here. That's why we're having this conversation. And once again, everything that we have talked about here, being concise and bringing it back to the decision maker. So bringing it back to the employer, helping them see the value, highlighting impact. You're helping the employer see what it would be like to have you on board. Are you going to be someone who breaks down under pressure when you're talking to an executive team? Or you're going to be someone who is going to excel at it? All right, those are the 3 mistakes that I see quite often at those higher level senior interviews for 6-level roles. So once again, under preparing for the delivery. Number 2, as silly it might sound, not answering the question. And finally, thinking that it's all about your skills and qualifications rather than storytelling. All right, my friend, that is it for today's episode. Once again, Master the Interview Course 2.0, where, by the way, I teach you exactly how to do all of that. How not just to find your stories, organize your stories, prep your stories, structure your stories, but also how to deliver them as that star candidate that is going for a 6-level job. Master the Interview 2.0 is live and the price is going up next week. So this is the time to join, snatch it, and start getting ready for interviews, even if you're not interviewing yet, because like we talked about in the beginning, it's all about building that muscle early on and being, as I say, usually in your peak performance state when you do get that dream interview. I will see you in Master the Interview, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.